And that's what we're doing here, Mr. James Gray, Judge, Your Honor, Your Worshipfulness. Aloha, spokesperson for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Thanks for coming to Hawaii.
Jeff, it's just great to be with you. It's a wonderful place, and some good things are happening here and really around the country. Of course, some less than wonderful things are happening, too.
Well, would you like to thank me right now for making sure that your trip to Hawaii was a write-off?
Actually, that's a nice try, but we'll have to keep working on that one.
Yeah, well, again, it's great to have you live in person. I've had a lot of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition people in. I've had your director.
Yeah, Neil Franklin probably.
Neil was on. Of course, Lenny Freeman makes several appearances. He's a former judge, as former judge from Colorado. One of the hot spots of what we're about to talk about today.
Well, people don't really know what to make of us, at least on the other side, the ones that propose that we continue with this disastrous policy of drug prohibition, because we have all the credentials. You know, we have the chiefs of police, we have the DEA, former DEA agents, the judges, the prosecutors, all the way through, and it isn't working. And all you need to do is legitimize the conversation, Jeff, as you well know. And that's simply all we need to do, because what we're doing does not stand scrutiny, and we're getting
How long were you on the bench? You're retired now, yes, Judge Gray?
Yeah, I was on the bench for 25 years. Before that, I was a federal prosecutor, and before that, I was a Navy JAG attorney. And as we were talking just a moment ago, I was in the Peace Corps in Costa Rica as well, but not as an attorney.
And how long, at what point in your career did you finally get some inclination that you were sitting there sending people to pay for the prison system's salaries and to keep the prisons full for the bottom line of corporate greed, as opposed to actually having an effect with a quote-unquote war on drugs?
You know, you're right. It really is money that's running this bus. And probably within a year or two of my taking the bench and just seeing us churn low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose whatsoever, filling our prisons, and then you just start looking at other ramifications. I don't know about Honolulu, but I probably do. But in Orange County, where I'm from, Los Angeles County, the biggest mental health facility is the county jail. You know, we're doing untold damage to these mentally fragile people, and that's probably true all around the country. It goes on and on and on.
Well,
it's a disaster.
My show was dedicated yesterday to three people, two of them who hung themselves in jail. Famous musician Mackie Fury, another famous surfer Marvin Foster. These guys hung themselves. You know, obviously they were strung out on methamphetamine.
Well, I'm not saying these drugs cannot be dangerous and harmful, but look, one way of addressing this is, who do you trust more, your minister of health or the mafia? You know, as far as quality control, a lot of the methamphetamine problems are simply you have no idea what you're putting into your body. At least we can control that. We all know smoking tobacco is harmful for your health, but at least when you go to your local mini mart, you're not and buy a pack of Marlboros, you know it's not going to contain
DDT or
that's right. So those are bigger issues, really, than the other ones. And then we haven't even talked about the money yet, which is
let's go back to the roots of this. Now, you're a judge. Besides sending people, maybe they're first offenders or repeats, on these marijuana, we'll use marijuana as the most active, 80% or 70% of our judicial system wasted and money spent on the marijuana issue. And then I would have to just wonder what percentage of them would come back with probation violations, which would actually send them into semi-hard time, if not hard time, and turn them into hardened criminals.
Jeff, people don't focus on that. But today, at least in California, we probably have 10,000 people in prison today that simply should not be there because, like you say, they were on parole for whatever reason, and then they maybe stupidly, but smoked marijuana, which will stay in your system detectable for about 30 days.
They missed their piss test.
They either don't go or they test dirty, and they're, boom, back in prison again. An absolute waste of money, human resources, and everything else you can think of. It's stupid.
Now, let me ask you, how many of your cohorts in the judicial system, since you were a judge, called you stupid when you came out of the closet and actually said, were you still presiding on the bench when you first joined LEAP? And
yes.
Were you allowed to keep your job as a judge when you're coming out and saying, you know what? In other words, did you stop sending people to jail for marijuana?
You know, it was not at all clear that would not be an ethical violation. And I took some chance at that, feeling that there's some things that are more important than job security. But Otherwise, you asked me two questions. So what do my colleagues on the bench think? What's that, publicly or privately? Because publicly, they either wouldn't say anything or that's appropriate, let's keep doing it. Privately, they'd almost all acknowledge what we're doing is not working. And,
but does everybody also acknowledge it's what keeps them paying their mortgages and sending their kids to private school?
Not on the bench, because we'll never run out of the need for judges. And honestly, we won't run out of the need for police either, or prosecutors. So that's not really a threat. Maybe prison guards would talk differently.
Well, they were the biggest lobby in California when it was on there.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, what you really need to get across to people here in Hawaii and everywhere else in the country is the tougher you get with regard to drug offenses, literally the softer you get with regard to the prosecution of everything else, because we only have so many resources.
Or education about drugs.
Well, all of that's true, too. Simply right. When it comes down, and I'm proud to be a libertarian, although I was a libertarian long before I joined the Libertarian Party, but it makes as much sense to me to control what people put into their bodies as adults as it does what they put into their minds. You know, it's none of the government's business. So let's hold people accountable for their actions, but not what they put into their bodies. And that was what the criminal justice system was designed for.
Talking to former judge, retired judge for an entire career, federal prosecutor, trial judge, Navy attorney, criminal defense, Peace Corps, Costa Rica, and retired, Jim Gray. Jim, we're going to get into this a little later, since I happen to be running on a Libertarian ticket for governor myself.
Good for you.
And you were the candidate for Vice President of the United States last 2012, yeah?
Proudly with Governor Gary Johnson, the most qualified person to be president I know of. Absolutely.
You know, before we get back to the devil and the detail and the fact that this marijuana is one of the most benign herbs known to man, if it's going to be used medically and recreationally, relative to drinking a bottle of whiskey and beating up your wife or vice versa and driving the wrong side down the freeway, incredible health issues with both alcohol and tobacco that you do not find with marijuana, never an overdose. It goes on and on. The fact that it was made illegal to hide industrial hemp, that so the oil companies and the textiles and the paper industries could have their way with the American people. At what point of your education on this did you realize that industrial hemp is what had pushed the marijuana into the limelight in order to hide behind the pizzazz?
I'd really never focused on it much, even when I held my press conference back in 1992. But more you see this, it is truly a viable industrial crop. And, of course, Canada is overjoyed that we continue to prohibit it here. It's a couple of $1 billion. They just import it here for our merchants. And England does as well, and various other countries. Okay. It's crazy. Treat hemp like cotton, for heaven's sake.
Listen, this is what brings me to, I guess, one of the biggest frustrations of my job sitting in this chair. By the way, it's not a job I don't get paid, but the bottom line being the frustration factor. So here I am in a country, and a quote-unquote the number one country on the planet per capita, first world country. We lead we are the country, blah, blah, blah. Just listen to the politics and the propaganda. And here we have a drug that's Schedule 1, and I'll use the industrial hemp side of it, that cannot even get you high. You could smoke an entire field of industrial hemp, but it cannot get you high, yet it's scheduled as a Schedule 1. The reason being they wanted to keep it off the market, the powers that be, and since the corporate government back in the 30s and the 20s corporations owned the government way back then, they were able to stick this law in there. And so you, as a judge, I think I might have a bone to pick with you, because you went through your entire legal career. Did you not know that Schedule 1 drug couldn't get you high, but yet wasn't that the clue, the fix was in?
Sure.
Wasn't the cat out of the bag that thing's on the list? There must be something wrong in Hootville.
The more you get into this, Jeff, as you're saying, the more you see how what we're doing is absolutely stark raving stupid. Hypocrisy. Let's talk about Marinol, for heaven's sake, because the natural substance marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug. The synthetic marijuana, Marinol, is a Schedule 3 drug. It can
synthetic,
be
made from chemicals instead of from the herb
That's
itself.
Right. But why? Because it can be prescribed by medical doctors, and the answer is pharmaceutical companies cannot make money on a plant, but they can make money on the synthetic drug, so they use their muscle to have it be a Schedule 3 drug. There's hypocrisy beyond belief in this entire area.
Okay, not only hypocrisy beyond belief, but let's talk economics. What was the latest numbers that came out of both Washington and Colorado on crime? Do you have any idea what this has done to the crime?
It exacerbates this problem. Look, I was on juvenile court for numbers of years, and I would see this. Ask yourself, have our listeners ask themselves the question, if I'm an adult drug dealer, how much risk-taking can I buy from a 15, 16-year-old kid in the inner city or anywhere else for $50 in cash? And the answer is quite a bit. It's chump change for a drug dealer, but for a kid it's a lot of money. So I recruit them into my drug dealing business and use them as gophers, lookouts, couriers, whatever, and then put tears in your eyes. As soon as their reliability is established, I'll trust them to go out and sell small amounts of drugs in their communities. Why? Because they make more money and I make more money.
Yeah, and they
Ask
also
yourself
aren't going to prison for it since they're juveniles.
That's true, too. Ask yourself one final question. If you have a 15, 16-year-old selling drugs in his or her community, who are they going to sell to, Jeff? You and me? Not a chance they're going to be selling to their 14, 15, 16-year-old peers, thus recruiting more children to this very lifestyle that we at least say we're trying to keep away from them, caused by drug prohibition. It's a disgusting, dastardly thing to oversee.
Well, how about this? I read it in the paper yesterday. So there was an article saying how because of the success Colorado and Washington have shown, even before it's kicked fully in by any means, we got 17 other states quickly following suit. We've got them legalized in the main cities and many states. Yes. Portland, Maine, many other places, completely legal. Other states have gone this direction. It's going that direction. And in the same thing, here comes this damned politician, Jim, Jim Gray from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. May I approach the bench? And this guy comes in there, this politician, and says, we're ready to set up an organization to provide our young people with an illegal drug. You son of a beehive, how dare you patronize the intelligence of the average human being? If I'm not mistaken, Your Honor, isn't there already an organization called a drug cartel that does just that?
You betcha. They have a vested interest in getting your 15-year-old daughter high on cocaine or methamphetamines or whatever, so they make more money on them. That's the problem. We do not see, Jeff, as you know, today, high school kids selling Jim Beam bourbon to each other in their high school campuses, but we see them selling marijuana and methamphetamines all the time because there's money in it. We don't see Mexican drug cartels raising illegal vineyards in our national forests in competition with winemakers either. They could, but there's no money in it. But they're raising illegal marijuana and other stuff all the time. It's the money. Ask Mexico, with 60,000 people died for about the last 5 years, a violent death because not of drugs, has nothing to do with drugs. It's drug money that has done it. And it's the same thing, I'm sure, here in Hawaii.
I think it was 150,000 dead in Colombia alone since the war on drugs began. 87,000 of them were civilians.
That's right.
And didn't what's the Organization of American States? Didn't they?
The OAS.
That would be from Canada down to the bottom of Chile. All the presidents of these countries, and didn't they come to America and say, by the way, you guys are greedy, you're making so much money putting people in jail, but you're causing wars in our country, and we would like you to stop treating marijuana illegal. Your people want it legal.
Again, Colorado and the state of Washington have made a huge benefit through all of this, because now the country of Uruguay and Mexico and others are saying, well, wait a minute, why should you make us keep these drugs illegal when even two of your states aren't doing it? So Uruguay is starting to sell drugs from the government. Vicente Fox from Mexico,
drugs
former president.
Or pot?
Drugs. No, all drugs. They're starting with marijuana, but they're
are they
talking
regulated
about
or just putting it out to 7-Eleven?
They are in effect becoming the distributor and the seller of these drugs, and they're taking away a whole lot of money from a whole lot of bad guys.
Oh no, let's review. Let's let the apocalypse begin. That these governments might try to even be regulators and sell it, and let's let the world crumble to its knees. And because without those drug cartels and all those gangs and all this underground, illegal black market stuff, what would the world be without this insanity?
Every drug czar we've ever had in our country has basically said, if we were to change our system, we'd become a nation of drug zombies. And I ask you, Czar McCaffrey or whomever else, if we were to legalize cocaine and give it away for free on every street corner, are you going to jam cocaine up your nose? Well, not me. It's insulting, if not silly, that we would do this. And the country of Portugal, of course, is absolutely clear that when you change your system, they did not increase drug usage at all. It stayed the same, but problem drug usage went down by 50%. And that's a good thing.
Again, I'm talking with former and retired judge, Mr. Jim Gray from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And I'm wondering, Jim, is this Law Enforcement Against Prohibition where you come, where you speak, Of course, you ran for the vice president, Libertarian candidate. Is this all coming from your heart? Is this a give back to the world, to your country?
Yes, both.
Got to be. There's
beyond.
no money in it, right?
Oh no. There's some risks involved with this, but the most important contribution I can make to the country I love is help us repeal this biggest failed policy in the history of our country, second only to slavery, which is drug prohibition.
I don't think people
it's
see the mechanics, Jim, and I think that might be part of the problem. Let me see if I got this right, and you, coming from law enforcement and the bench, help me. Mechanics being, if you regulate the hard drugs, the marijuana should be, just for my opinion, and again, I'm running for governor, so as a platform, should be available for someone over a certain age,
yes.
Just like alcohol is.
Hands down.
And
yes.
then, obviously, for the people who need it medically, they would be able to really fine-tune that to see what's your problem, which one of these strains is best for you. Take Sanjay Gupta's expose on the whole thing, right? But I think what they don't understand is how to put the heroin and the PCP and or the methamphetamine into the system, and I would like to throw my idea out there and have you take a shot at it. So, folks, from now on, it's legal, and if you want it, you can sign up and put your name right here, and we will allow you to have a certain amount that you. And if you claim you want something more, we're gonna have a doctor look at you, and that's going to shut down the entire black market in these neighborhoods that are now creating 30 or 80% of our crime and burglary systems, not to mention our violent crime and or some idiot tapes a shotgun to the back of his girlfriend's head because he's stoned out for 4 days on methamphetamine. Okay? And at that point, now that everybody shows up every day for their heroin or their methamphetamine or whatever their drug of choice is, when they hit bottom, as they are wont to do, they hit bottom. That's how they get rehabilitated. You gotta want it. They're surrounded by the health and the professionals. They're there. There's a safety net just waiting for these people that right now all they've got left is a gutter and their families who don't trust them.
All of that is right. Bring people that are having drug problems closer to medical professionals that can help them instead of making them automatic criminals and pushing them farther away. But the beauty of our system, in fact, is federalism. And that means you allow each state to decide how best to serve and protect its people. What you're suggesting, I think, is a marvelous idea, and I would recommend it here in Hawaii or Nebraska or California or otherwise, but maybe Ohio will come up with something different. We'll see what works and what doesn't. Back on this campaign just in 2012 with Governor Gary Johnson running as a Libertarian for president, he would say routinely, and he's right, look, that will result in some marvelous successes in some other states that can be copied and maybe some failures that can then be avoided. That's the beauty of our system.
Why is my glass half empty, Jim, considering those successes have already occurred in other countries, let alone states?
Absolutely.
Now, how can American people be so bag over our head that when other countries implement these quote-unquote forward-thinking disciplines, and it works, why wouldn't we just all turn around and say, damn, you're right, it works. We can get... Listen, let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Matsumoto. You're 80 years old. Have your house ever been broken into? Yes, it's been broken into 3 times. They keep coming back. Yeah. Would you like crime to drop 80%?
Sure.
Would you like to get these people off the street? Would you like to help these people? Answer, yes, yes, yes.
How about
but why can't our politicians have the nerve or the common sense to put this in front of people? Do you know why?
I have an answer, and it's just between us. There's no one else listening, is there?
We'll keep it on the queue.
Okay. I'm here to tell you that I had 2 sitting congressmen in Orange County, conservative Republicans, and we were discussing this very issue. They brought it up, and they said, Jim, you're right. Most people in Washington realize the war on drugs is not winnable, but it's eminently fundable, and they're addicted to the drug war funding. It's money, Jeff.
How could you sleep at night knowing you were throwing innocent people into prison and all their relatives being affected, let alone their children, and the fact that you were helping turn them into career criminals? How could these people sleep at night?
I have to follow the law, and if I don't follow the law, then I should resign. But I didn't have to do it quietly, and I would, in my chambers, talk to the prosecutors and others and see if we could do other things. But there are mandatory minimum sentences, and to that degree, I'd have to do that. But we were also able publicly to get this word out, and we're making huge progress. The Rockefeller drug laws in New York were just atrocious, and at least they have been.
You're black, you're searched.
That's right too. That stop and frisk stuff, which is a violation of our Constitution. It's not what America stands for. So we've got to talk the truth, and go back to principles makes us great. What is that? The soul of the United States of America, our liberties and freedoms, and today our very soul is under attack by our very own government, and we've got to stand up on this program and elsewhere and say this is not what we are.
Okay, besides being a former judge and a Law Enforcement Against Prohibition spokesperson, you ran for vice president, a Libertarian candidate. And I have to ask you, did you ever get the feeling that it's too little too late, and the fact that we've been dumbed down by the corporate powers that be, whether they've written our scholastic books for our children to learn, what they've omitted to teach these kids, what they've decided is pertinent to their futures? Is it too little too late? Could we ever turn around the propaganda that's turned us into the greatest, the ugly American epitome of it all? We're just stupid.
Jeff, I am deeply concerned for our country. I think we're resilient. I'm an innate optimist, but the way we're going from our budget standpoint, from our education, from our health care, immigration, all of these various things, we're simply doing it wrong. And there are answers. I'm going to give myself a plug here. I've written a book called Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems. It's on the market for the Forum Press. And, there are answers. All we need to do is allow ourselves to discuss them, and we can resalvage. We can bring back excellence to our education system. We just need some leaders. And I don't know of any leaders in our country today, particularly at all, other than Gary Johnson, who I'm proud to have run with.
Well, you don't know them because it takes corporate money to be known.
It's true.
And then, if you want to go to politics for 1 second before we get back to Prohibition in 101, my main thrust and my goals for a governor is campaign finance reform. And I must hate to say it, but state-funded elections is the only way I see it going.
It's hard for libertarians to swallow that, but I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I call myself a functional libertarian.
Gotcha.
I want to do what works, and that one I think will work. There's some constitutional issues the way our Supreme Court has gone, but I'm here to tell you money is much, much too important in our elections, and we've just got to shut that down.
Oh, yeah, well, as we speak, Supreme Court's deciding whether you should be allowed to give $2.5 million per candidate, is it not?
Yes, we can go to Citizens United if you want to really.
Well, no, this is even worse to me
mad,
because Citizens United put up the super PAC, but now they're looking at saying, hey, it's freedom of speech. We're going to limit you to $2.5 million, 77 times the mean income of any individual family in America.
Well,
you can now give that to one politician. In fact, you can be more powerful than the political party in that city, town, or county.
We all have our various views on these things. I would actually, under these circumstances, allow individuals to give unlimited amounts of money to people under today's system, but no non-human being entities give any money whatsoever. Then you'd immediately have to disclose it and have it on the internet and the rest of that. And if they
Let's
thought
drop
I was
that because this is going to go on.
It will.
Let's
continue
go have a beer
long
later
ways.
and we'll talk about that. Okay, so let me bring it back into focus with Mr. Jim Gray, former judge. Again, Navy attorney, federal prosecutor, trial judge, Orange County. Retired.
Yes, about 4 years
and then
ago.
you picked up a new hobby. It was called payback. Give back to the society that you saw had issues, and it was through Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Now, did somebody approach you? How did you rehabilitate?
No one approached me, Jeff. It was my own initiative. Back in, I can tell you, April the 8th of 1992, I held a press conference as a sitting judge and simply said, what we're doing is not working and we're going to have to change away from this failed policy. Thereafter, I started getting contacted by all kinds of different people. And it made the papers, and I've been actively involved with it ever since. But no, this was all my looking. I'm still in the Peace Corps, and just looking at what was happening here to my country, and our people, I simply could not tolerate it any
What about
longer.
the idea of packing it up down to Panama, Indonesia, Philippines, Peru, Ecuador, Uruguay, you name it?
Wonderful places. I'm an American, and I'll live or die as an American, my friend.
Just had to poke you with that.
I love our country.
Let's go here. Okay, Mr. Gray. Let's go to Prohibition 101. What the heck's wrong with Prohibition, generically speaking, in the shortest explanation as you've got?
You can listen to Mr. Albert Einstein, Abraham Lincoln, all of these various people, and they basically will tell you that prohibition, trying to keep people from doing what they want to do, that doesn't hurt anybody, is a victimless crime, and generating a huge market to allow that to happen doesn't work. Simply flat out does not work. And
doesn't it work for the guys who are on the other end, the black market guys?
Oh, absolutely. That it works for them.
How about the judicial system who gets to prosecute everyone?
Again, we'll never run out of a need for judges, but it certainly does increase money for law enforcement.
What about the Motel 6 called your private prison?
I'm not against private prisons. As long as they have absolutely no say in who comes there or how long they stay. I personally think that private prisons run better than public prisons do.
Yeah.
And so
what about their lobbying techniques that would lobby against something such as a legalization of marijuana?
That is definitely a problem. However, it's no more of a problem than the prison guards unions that are lobbying today. So that we're going to have lobbying actions no matter what anyway. But private prisons, it does not concern me.
So I think what you just mentioned, just said from a judge's point of view was prohibition has been proven by greater minds than mine that it will never work because it's got a built-in inherent flaw, which means it just fosters the negativity that it completely blows away what this activity could ever accomplish.
Yes. As Governor Johnson again says, and he's right, that no one is saying that some of these drugs are not harmful, without question, but probably only 10% of the drug problems in our country are actually related to the drugs. 90% are drug prohibition problems. The bad quality, the money, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, the death, the coercion, the crime.
Let me tell you.
Stealing to pay for it.
You like statistics. The year after we finally came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibitions, homicides went down by 40% and continued to go down thereafter. The same thing's going to happen when we come to our senses and repeal drug prohibition.
Oh, my Lord. Now think about it. Those guys were fighting over who got to get the bootleg and corner what market.
What's the matter with us? Absolutely.
This drug, quote-unquote, war on drugs is so insipid and insidiously in every corner. We'd be bringing down a murder rate of our entire country by 60%.
And I'm going to quarrel with Attorney General Holder. You know, he did come out with these various comments, and I love what he said. It's about time, but I love what he said. But he was saying that the criminal justice system is broken. Okay, who stands for the perpetuation of the status quo? He does. He is the absolute highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the United States of America. What's he done? You know, he talks a little bit about this stuff. What's he done since? Has he proposed legislation? Has he given clemency or recommended clemency to the president for all of these people that are in prison that should not be there? I again say to you and anyone listening, we don't have any leadership in our country today. If he really believed what he said, he would be doing something instead of just talking about it.
Well, I'm of the opinion we have all the leadership in the country today. It's called money. It's called corporate money. It's called who can buy the biggest politician, who can get legislation written specifically for them and their industry.
It's true.
And the rest of the planet and the environment and you name it can all go to hell.
Well, and that's what's happening. And money is just unbelievably strong in that regard. But if the American people actually get the truth given to them, and in a lot of ways I was not a fan of Ronald Reagan, but at least he would talk to us directly. He would be a leader. He'd say, this is the direction we're going to go, and this is why. And I applaud that. And that's what we need today. And we need to change these directions, again, in education and in the war on drugs and again, all of these
we just went around in a circle, Judge Gray, because that's where you brought me to my glass being half empty again. You don't know anybody that's out there except this one fellow that you ran with for president, right?
Yes, sir. Pretty good start.
Well, that would seem to show me that we've gotten ourselves to the point where if you can't even find people who feel along those lines, how are you going to find people to vote for them? How are you going to find people to bother to vote, Jim?
As I sit here today, Jeff, had we been able to be a part of the presidential debates, on the televised debates, we would have been competitive. Had we been seen as viable, Governor Gary Johnson would have come very close, if not being elected president of the United States. And we have a plan. I'm trying to get him to run for president in 2016. We're going to go for that Presidential Debates Commission and change their rules with their sponsors, with the law, whatever it needs to take. It is un-American to keep someone who is in a party on 48 states of the United States of America and not have a seat at the table.
So what you just told me is that indeed my glass shouldn't be so empty, that the people of America are not that stupid, that if Gary, for instance, and yourself had gotten more public attention, that the people would have seen the light, would have seen reality.
I believe
that they're not that stupid, they're not that brainwashed after all.
I believe that. Plus, of course, people will really, the wasted vote syndrome was death on us. A lot of people wanted to vote. We were their choice, but when it came down to it, they voted against Romney, they voted against Obama. But had it just be able to vote for the person that is your favorite, we would have done much better. But again, we didn't have the exposure. I would venture to say that 80% of the people who went to the ballots and the ballot box didn't even know who we were in last November. So that certainly is a problem.
Isn't that pretty much?
That's why we need to be in those presidential debates.
Well, that's why we need to get corporate money out of politics, because
Clearly.
for somebody with a platform that people may resonate with, they don't even get to get their piece made because they're not bought and sold for by corporate America.
I completely agree with that.
This sounds so pat. I can just see these veterans sitting back going, yeah, damn commie. Listen to you. What do you know about? Did you ever fight for your country?
Well,
because it sounds pat, right? We've been taught, propaganda has kind of got to us and said anybody that starts blaming corporate America for everything is pretty much a hippie without a job.
Let me tell you, I was the only one of the 6 of us running for president or vice president that actually served in the military. I got a combat action ribbon in Vietnam. Nobody's going to talk that way to me. And I have seen firsthand what happens when you put our troops in harm's way without having the backup that they needed, the education and the munitions. And it's not going to happen under our administration.
Talking with Judge Jim Gray again, illustrious career, and then after retiring, speaker for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. We're talking uncounted number of judges, narcotics officers, DEAs, undercovers, prison, I presume wardens, police chiefs, who all came out and had the nerve to stand up and say, this is so important. I'll take the flack from my fellow officers and my compatriots around me, my neighbors, perhaps my family. I'm willing to take this because it means so much to me to come and tell the truth. The truth is the war on drugs is not working. In fact, it's a mechanism in order for the corporate America to make money at the expense initially of brown and black people. They've expanded it to whoever they can catch.
It's true. All of that is true.
Isn't that sad?
It does not take a sociologist to go through any jail or prison in our country and see that people of color are vastly overrepresented. And I speak with black churches, Hispanic churches, and say, "What's the matter with you? You're my hosts, and I'm going to get mad at you. Why are you so quiet? People like me, you don't find people that look like me in prison as much, nearly as people that look like you. Stand up and let's turn this around. This is a war on people, not a war on drugs."
Oh, that's so damn true. Now, how, reefer madness, we go there, okay?
Oh, gee.
I mean, come on. Do you know, we can all look back at Reefer Madness and see a really bad B movie, right? We can see the monster from the Black Lagoon kind of thing.
It would have been funny, except that it was so
did
sadistic.
They get the people to, because you think about it now, it's still so unacceptable to say, oh, by the way, Judge, do you smoke pot?
I never have.
Have you ever inhaled?
No, I'm not interested. However, I'm here to tell you, from what I understand, marijuana is far less dangerous than my drug of choice, which, of course, is bourbon or wine.
And I've had uncounted doctors in here and scientists saying they've never seen an overdose from pot. Relatively speaking, you don't see that. And, of course, as Schedule 1. I've had emergency room doctors in here say, I've seen everybody die in front of me except for one Schedule 1 drug. No one's ever died from pot. In fact, I don't see them in the emergency room from pot.
No, I mean, you go back to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all those folks, and they raised hemp, and they'd smoke. They'd smoke what was marijuana back then. It goes back thousands and thousands of years.
I mean, let's don't go into the endocannabinoids and the exocannabinoids. And I've been over it. My listeners have heard it. Of course, I got into this and got my education. I recommend any of you out there do the same by using a computer. Don't listen to what other people in their gingens might have to tell you. You'll get your own opinion if you go do some research. Mine came from the Roger Christie story. He's still in the federal prison. They kept him there for 3.5 years until they wore him down to the point and they said, look, you still don't have anything on us. and we could possibly send you and your wife you'll stay in prison. She'll go to prison. How's it like the plea bargain? And they finally wore the guy down to a plea bargain.
The mandatory minimum sentences, the drug sentences, give the prosecutors much too much power, and they can extort prison sentences out of people just because the alternative, 3 strikes, even if you're factually innocent, just simply didn't do this, have somebody lying, whatever the testimony might be, you'll plead guilty for 5 years in prison just because the possibility of getting 25 years to life is just forces you, coerces you.
It's called the plea bargain revolving door, is it not?
Jeff, it's wrong. It's not what we stand for. It is the wrong thing to do. But let me go back for a moment, because in California we tried to put an initiative on the ballot last November to treat marijuana like wine. And we didn't get enough money to get enough signatures, but it did go through the California State Attorney General's office. And that language came back, and it ensured that it would have passed had it been on the ballot, because it said, if this passes and we treat marijuana like wine, we will save tens of millions of dollars each year in enforcement costs and generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues.
Tax
revenue. I mean, what's the largest cash crop
today? Let's review. By the way, I've got we're burning through this time for obvious reasons. We both have a dog in this fight. It's called caring about each other and caring about our futures to come. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Our children and their children. This is fundamental to the health of a society, to say the least.
It's the most patriotic thing I can do for the country I love.
And if anybody's got a call, have time for one at 296-5467. If you want to do a question, 296-5467. The future. Would you agree with me in saying that the dam has broken, the water has not reached to every village yet, but that it's a done deal? Not only have the people spoken, but so has the president of every other country south of the border told us, get off your greedy ocoles and stop this madness, that your people don't want this, and neither do we. You're causing wars in our countries. It's a done deal.
It is.
What can we do? Is this all I can do to help grease this wheel, and let people out there going, look, if we know it's going to happen for all the right reasons, why don't we get on board right now and start seeing a better day tomorrow?
Well, we're working on it. I am here to tell you that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel is now in view. The war on drugs is going to be over, I think, within about 4 or 5 years.
That must help a lot of folks in there with 3.5-year sentences left, yeah, Jim, in federal prisons and state prisons.
It's outrageous that we don't have clemency commissions looking at every prison sentence. Now, some people, if they were out there selling drugs for profit and it was illegal, they should be in prison. Although, for heaven's sake, 30 years, 20, can you imagine how much 1 year in prison would be for your life? 10 years, it's really out of control. So we should look at every sentence that has been implemented and see if, in fact, it is appropriate in today's world. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in prison today in our country, Jeff, that simply flat out should not be there.
Well,
shame on
it's
us.
like the Matrix. They're there. Their warm bodies are being used to fuel an economy.
It's true.
In this case, they're fueling the prison industrial economy and the politics that get their campaign contributions paid along with it.
It is true, and it's outrageous. And I get emotional thinking about this.
I mean, and then how old are you?
I am 68 years old.
So let's send you down to the Rotary Club or to the Lions Club. Let's send you down to the Elks Club, where we've got retired people often known to congregate. And let's put you and let's give you a speech at the Elks Club. What kind of a reception do they give you at a place like that?
I've spoken to every Elks Club, Rotary Club within 15-mile radius of where I am. Not a chance. Only it depends what you do. How many people want to legalize marijuana? If that's what you come in, their minds will freeze. You get nowhere. However, invariably what I do is say, okay, forget my experience. Use your own insights. How many of you believe that we in the United States of America are in better shape today than we were 5 years ago with regard to this critical issue of drug abuse and all the crime and misery that goes with it? No one raises their hands.
Let me ask you,
now they're with me, and then we talk.
As a spokesperson, former Judge Jim Grave, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, all this talk about marijuana. You guys seem to me, like you said, a functional libertarian. You seem like a functional leap guy. You're going along with this, but this carries way beyond marijuana.
Yes, it does.
The word is against prohibition.
Correct.
Talk to me about that for a second. We got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. There are programs today, like you were saying earlier, that are working. Switzerland actually has a medicalized program for heroin-addicted people that went in the late 1990s, and it reduced crime about 2/3 in the neighborhood surrounding the clinics. It reduced the actual drug usage also, because if they were no longer selling to support their habits, so drug usage went down. Emulate that program. Use programs of that kind. Holland has done the same thing with regard to their decriminalization. Portugal demonstrably the same way.
And then again, so that's
there's
a simple
hope here.
answer. Now, what's
here.
the problem? The problem is we've been propagandized by our government to feel that any mention of these things, you're just, that's drugs. That's drugs.
The mention
panic.
Has a connotation that you don't care if my 12-year-old daughter buys cocaine in a vending machine across from her elementary school.
And that is something fostered upon us by our own government.
That's right. We're fighting decades of rhetoric.
And then you're like, you fought for us. You have a medal for being wounded or in battle or whatnot. You went to Vietnam. You mentioned you're an American. It's all about America. How do you feel about your country from the top 1% of it?
Well, I am optimistic that we can turn out of this tailspin that we are now in.
All right. I figure if they go to your book, they can help them. What's it? Your title is?
Well, there are a couple. One is Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It. And another, which talks about other issues, is A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems.
Go to Google General Search and push in Jim Gray,
Judge Jim Gray will do it. Leap would do it as well.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for our Lello crew for coming in. I hope some folks get an education. Pleasure to meet you.
Go to judgejimgray.com and we'll talk more.
judgejimgray.com, and thanks for doing what you've done and what you do.
Jeff,
keep doing it.
Thank you. Good
Aloha, I'm your solar guy. That was quite an interview about something that could solve a lot of Hawaii's problems. Aloha. Have a great weekend. I'll be back tomorrow at the same time. If you need me, it's 554-7200, 554-7200. Did I mention I am the solar guy? Aloha.